If you want to fix something, start with what your car just broke. Daniel Whitmore stopped with his hand halfway inside his coat. Rain tapped against the roof of the black luxury SUV behind him, and muddy water streamed along the curb of a narrow Pittsburgh street. Less than 30 seconds earlier, his driver had crossed a deep puddle beside a school bus stop, sending a sheet of brown water across Sarah Mitchell and her 2 children. Now the bus was disappearing around the corner. 6-year-old Grace stared down at her yellow coat, her lower lip trembling. "Mom, this is my good one." Sarah crouched beside her and wiped at the mud with a tissue already soaked through. "It is still your good coat. It looks terrible. It looks washable." Sarah pulled her close, then glanced at Ethan. Her 10-year-old son stood with his backpack against his chest, watching the empty road. "I can walk," he said. "It is almost 3 miles, Sarah replied. "Then I will be late." "You are not walking 3 miles in this rain." Daniel stood several feet away, feeling strangely useless. At 42, he could approve projects worth millions before breakfast. Yet he had no idea how to repair the next 20 minutes of this woman's morning. "I am sorry," he said. Sarah rose. Wet strands of light brown hair clung to her cheek. Mud covered the lower half of her inexpensive coat, but her voice remained controlled. "You were not driving. It is my car." Daniel reached toward his wallet. Sarah noticed immediately. "No, please. At least let me pay for the cleaning. That does not get them to school." Daniel looked toward the intersection. "Then let me drive them." Sarah studied him, then looked at the SUV. "To Roosevelt Elementary?" "Straight there." Grace moved closer to her mother. "We do not know him." Sarah nodded. "You are right." She took out a phone with a cracked corner, photographed the license plate, called the school office, and confirmed that someone would meet the children at the entrance. Daniel waited without interrupting. Only then did Sarah open the rear door. Grace hesitated when she saw the cream leather seats. "I am muddy." Daniel gave her a small smile. "Seats can be cleaned." Ethan climbed in beside her. Daniel turned to Sarah. "Come with us. We can take you wherever you need to go afterward." Sarah checked the time. "Brookside Senior Living. My shift starts soon. Then we will take you there." "No. Your car made my children miss their bus. Getting them to school fixes that part. The rest of my day is still mine." Daniel looked at her for a moment. "What is your name?" "Sarah Mitchell." "Daniel Whitmore." Something flickered across her face. Recognition. "I know." Before he could ask what she meant, Sarah leaned into the SUV and kissed both children. "Ethan, stay with your sister." "I will." "Grace, go directly to the office." "Okay, Mom." Sarah closed the door and stepped back into the rain. 20 minutes later, Ethan and Grace were safely inside Roosevelt Elementary. Daniel returned to the SUV, still thinking about Sarah's refusal. His driver leaned toward the rear floor. "Mr. Whitmore, I think she dropped something." He lifted a damp, white envelope. Daniel took it without opening it. Sarah Mitchell's name was printed across the front. Then he saw the logo in the upper left corner. Whitmore Urban Development. Beneath it were 3 words he recognized immediately. Oak Ridge Apartments Relocation. Daniel stared at the envelope while rain moved slowly across the windshield. The woman whose morning his car had disrupted was already living inside a decision his company had made months ago. Daniel did not open the envelope. He turned it over once, saw Sarah Mitchell's name again, and handed it carefully to his driver. Brookside Senior Living. 25 minutes later, Daniel entered a modest brick building east of downtown Pittsburgh, carrying the damp envelope beneath his coat. Sarah was already working. She wore navy scrubs now, her hair tied back, guiding an elderly man toward the dining room with patient attention. When she noticed Daniel, concern immediately crossed her face. "Are my children all right?" "They are fine. Both are at school." Her shoulders relaxed. Daniel held out the envelope. "You left this in the car." Sarah took it quickly. Her fingers covered the Whitmore Urban Development logo. "Thank you." "Oak Ridge Apartments," Daniel said quietly. Sarah looked at him. "What about it?" "My company owns the redevelopment project." "I know. That is why you recognized me." Sarah nodded. A nurse called her name from farther down the hallway. She checked the clock. "I need to get back." "Have you applied for relocation assistance?" Sarah gave him a tired expression. 3 times. Daniel paused. 3. Please do not make one phone call and move me ahead because you happened to meet me in the rain. That was not what I was going to do. Good. She slipped the envelope into her worn canvas bag. Because there are other families at Oak Ridge who never got splashed by your car. Then she returned to work. By 10:30 that morning, Daniel was standing inside his office at Whitmore Urban Development, 30 floors above downtown Pittsburgh. Laura Bennett, the company's compliance director, sat across from him with Sarah's relocation history open on her laptop. 3 submissions in 6 weeks, Laura said. The first was incomplete. Why? She reported income from Brookside and additional evening work at Keystone Office Services. One requested pay statement was missing. Was she unemployed that week? No. She simply was not scheduled for hours at the second job. Laura opened the next record. Her second submission was flagged because her reported monthly income changed. Because her hours changed. That appears to be the reason. And the third? Laura hesitated. It became an appeal. Additional documentation was requested. Her response arrived 1 day after the deadline. Daniel stared at her. 1 day. Yes. Did anyone speak with her? The record shows automated notices and 2 outgoing calls. Neither call connected. Daniel walked toward the windows. From 30 floors up, Pittsburgh looked almost effortless. Bridges crossed the rivers in clean lines. Buildings became rectangles. Traffic became motion without faces. Who approved these rules? He asked. The relocation framework went through operations, legal, finance, and executive review. Laura paused. Your authorization is on the final approval. Daniel turned back. Show me. She opened the archived project file. There it was, Oak Ridge Redevelopment Relocation Framework. At the bottom of the final authorization page was his electronic signature, Daniel Whitmore. He remembered the project. He remembered discussions about financing, construction schedules, occupancy targets, and relocation budgets. What he did not remember was Sarah Mitchell, or Grace's yellow coat, or Ethan calculating whether he could walk nearly 3 miles to school. I want the activity log, Daniel said. Laura looked at him. The activity log will only show when documents were accessed. It cannot tell us how carefully anyone reviewed the broader project. I understand. Show me anyway. Laura entered the internal archive. The final authorization page appeared on Daniel's screen. Accessed at 4 hours, 18 minutes, and 7 seconds in the afternoon. Signature registered at 4 hours, 18 minutes, and 16 seconds. Daniel leaned closer. 9 seconds. Laura remained silent. I am not saying I knew nothing about the project, he said. Of course not. But that page carried the final authority. Yes. Daniel looked at Sarah's 6-week application history beside his 9-second authorization record. For years, speed had looked like competence to him. That morning, for the first time, 9 seconds looked very different when measured against 42 days of someone else's life. Daniel spent the next 2 hours trying to convince himself that 9 seconds did not mean what it felt like it meant. He had attended meetings about Oak Ridge. He had reviewed financial projections, construction schedules, and relocation budgets. He had not blindly signed a project he knew nothing about. But the number stayed with him anyway. 9 seconds. At noon, he returned to Brookside Senior Living and found Sarah outside beneath a covered employee entrance, eating half a turkey sandwich from a plastic container. She looked at him and sighed. You came back. I reviewed your applications. Sarah closed the container. I asked you not to move me ahead. I did not. That made her look up. Daniel stayed several feet away. Your appeal response arrived 1 day late. I know. Can I ask why? Sarah glanced toward the parking lot. Rainwater still collected along the curb. Grace had a fever. Ethan had a school project due the next morning. I finished my shift here, picked them up from my sister, stopped at the pharmacy, made dinner, helped Ethan with his project, got Grace settled, then went to Keystone for an evening shift because I could not afford to lose those hours. She rubbed her thumb along the edge of the container. I saw the email. I thought I had until the next day. By the time I checked again, it was after midnight. Daniel said nothing. There was no dramatic mistake to blame. Just work, children, medicine, dinner, homework, and a clock that kept moving whether Sarah was ready or not. I found my authorization, he said. For Oak Ridge. Sarah waited. The final approval page was open for 9 seconds before my signature was registered. Her expression changed. 9 seconds. I knew about the project before that. I am not pretending otherwise. But that was the final authorization. Sarah looked down at her lunch. I spent 42 days living inside your 9 seconds. Daniel felt the sentence settle harder than anger would have. I am sorry. I believe you. Somehow, that offered no relief. Let me review your case personally. Sarah shook her head. Then I become the woman who happened to meet Daniel Whitmore. You need help? Yes. The answer came without pride or hesitation. I need it badly. My rent situation is uncertain. My car makes a noise every morning that I am afraid to have diagnosed. Ethan needs new sneakers. Grace needs a winter coat soon. I am not refusing help because I enjoy struggling. Then let me help. Sarah looked directly at him. What happens to everyone else? Daniel paused. We can review other cases. Because you met me? Because your case may show a larger problem. Then do not start with my case. Daniel frowned. Where should I start? Sarah checked the time and stood. Her break was almost over. You want to understand Oak Ridge? Yes. Then come see what comparable means. Comparable. That word is all over your relocation paperwork. She picked up her canvas bag. Come to Oak Ridge at 5:30. What will I see? Sarah stepped toward the employee entrance, then turned back. Mrs. Cooper was offered an apartment 12 miles from the clinic she depends on. Michael Reed was offered one that could move his son out of the school program supporting him. The Navarro family received 4 referrals and could not find one place ready to take them. Daniel looked at her. Those were considered comparable. On paper. She opened the door. Your company compares addresses, Mr. Whitmore. We compare lives. At 5:27 that evening, Daniel parked 2 blocks from Oak Ridge Apartments and walked through the damp Pittsburgh air toward the entrance. Sarah was waiting beneath the awning. She did not smile when she saw him. She simply opened the door. You wanted to understand what you signed, she said. Come inside. The first thing Daniel noticed inside Oak Ridge was how ordinary everything looked. The hallway smelled faintly of laundry detergent and tomato sauce. Children's drawings were taped beside apartment doors. A folding stroller rested beneath the stairs. Near the mailboxes, a Whitmore Urban Development relocation notice hung beside a school calendar and a handwritten reminder about trash pickup. Nothing looked like the clean architectural renderings Daniel remembered approving. Sarah walked ahead of him. Mrs. Cooper is expecting us. On the second floor, an elderly woman opened her door holding a folder against her chest. Mr. Whitmore? Yes, ma'am. Sarah says you want to understand the apartment they offered me. I do. Mrs. Cooper handed him a printed referral. It is a nice place. I am sure somebody would be grateful for it. Daniel looked at the address. Then what is the problem? My clinic is 12 miles from there. Do you drive? I stopped driving 4 years ago. Daniel looked at Sarah. She said nothing. Mrs. Cooper continued. My daughter can help sometimes, but she works. The bus trip would take more than an hour each way. Daniel glanced at the referral. 2 bedrooms. Approved rent. Within the company's distance requirement. Comparable. Down the hallway, Sarah introduced him to Michael Reed and his 9-year-old son, Liam. The boy sat at the kitchen table arranging colored pencils beside a school worksheet. Michael placed another referral in Daniel's hand. The apartment is affordable, he said. The neighborhood looks fine, but it is outside Liam's school district. Daniel looked toward the child. Why is staying at his school important? Michael lowered his voice. Liam is autistic. His current school has a support classroom and staff who know him. It took us almost 2 years to build a routine that works. Daniel looked again at the paper. The relocation checklist included rent, bedrooms, distance, and availability. School continuity was nowhere on the page. Did anyone ask about this? Not before sending the referral. Sarah led Daniel downstairs to another apartment, where Carlos and Elena Navarro sat at a small dining table with 4 printed listings spread between them. Carlos tapped the first page. No vacancy. Elena touched the second. Same thing. The third required income we could not verify the way they wanted, Carlos said. And the fourth? Daniel asked. Elena gave a tired smile. We called 3 times. Nobody called back. What does your relocation portal say? Carlos turned his phone toward Daniel. The status showed referral completed. Daniel stared at the words. Completed? Apparently. But you do not have housing. Exactly. Daniel looked toward Sarah. How many people here have situations like this? Your reports say 118 affected units. I asked about people. Sarah held his gaze. That is the problem. They stepped back into the hallway. Behind one door, dishes clinked. Somewhere upstairs, a child laughed. A television played softly through another wall. Daniel had reviewed hundreds of pages about Oak Ridge, yet none had contained the sound of someone making dinner or a child doing homework. I thought comparable meant we were protecting people from being worse off, he said. Sarah stopped near the stairwell. Comparable to what? Daniel looked at her. She pointed toward Mrs. Cooper's door. Same number of bedrooms, but she may lose easy access to her doctor. Then toward Michael's apartment. Similar rent, but Liam may lose the school support he depends on. She glanced toward the Navarros door. 4. Referrals, but no actual place to move. Daniel lowered his eyes to the paperwork in his hand. You compare addresses, Sarah said quietly. We compare lives. For the first time, Daniel understood why every box on the forms could be checked while the people standing behind those forms still had nowhere workable to go. Tell me what you need, he said. Sarah shook her head. Do not ask me yet. Why? She stepped aside and looked down the long hallway lined with apartment doors. Because if I answer for everyone, you will only hear one person again. Daniel followed her gaze. Sarah pointed toward the nearest door. Start there. Daniel knocked on 7 doors before Sarah finally led him to her apartment. Some residents invited him inside. Others spoke from the doorway. One woman apologized because she had to leave for an evening shift in 20 minutes. A father holding a grocery bag simply said he had not understood half the relocation forms and was embarrassed to admit it. By 7:15, Daniel no longer thought of Oak Ridge as 118 units. The number felt almost meaningless. Sarah unlocked her door. Kids, I am home. Ethan sat at the kitchen table finishing homework while Grace colored beside him. Her yellow coat hung over a chair. Most of the mud was gone, but a faint brown mark remained near the pocket. Grace caught Daniel looking at it. Mom got almost all of it out. Daniel smiled. Your mom seems good at fixing things. Sarah set down her canvas bag. Not everything. The apartment was small but carefully kept. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. 2 lunch containers dried beside the sink. A grocery list was held beneath a magnet beside utility bills and the relocation envelope. Daniel sat when Sarah motioned toward the table. I want to offer you something, he said. Her expression tightened. Daniel, please hear me out. He folded his hands. Whitmore owns another property about 5 miles from here. 2 bedrooms. Good maintenance. I can cover the deposit, moving expenses, school transportation during the transition, and the difference in rent for 1 year. Sarah did not answer. Daniel expected an immediate refusal. Instead, she looked toward Ethan and Grace. For several seconds, he saw something harder than pride on her face. Need. Do you know how much money I have until Friday? She asked. No, $211. She glanced toward the refrigerator. Groceries come out of that. Gas comes out of that. Ethan needs sneakers. Grace needs a warmer coat before winter really starts. And my car makes a sound every morning that I keep hoping will disappear because finding out what it is costs money. Daniel remained quiet. So do not think I am too proud to accept help. Then accept it. Sarah looked at him. For one brief moment, Daniel thought she might. Her fingers rested on the relocation envelope. If I say yes, what happens to Mrs. Cooper? I can review her case. Michael and Liam? There's 2. The Navarros. Yes. Sarah shook her head slowly. Because you met them tonight. Daniel stopped. What about the people whose doors stayed closed? She asked. What about the woman working tonight? What about the families you will never personally meet? We can expand the review. Then expand it before you rescue me. Daniel leaned back. Sarah, you and your children need somewhere stable to live. I know. Her voice softened. That is why saying no hurts. She looked at Grace, then Ethan. But if I accept this because your car happened to splash us, then luck becomes the reason my children are safe. Daniel had no answer. Sarah pushed the envelope across the table. What happens to everyone you did not accidentally meet? The apartment became quiet except for Grace moving a crayon across paper. Daniel looked at the envelope, then at the faint stain on the yellow coat. He had arrived believing generosity was the opposite of indifference. Now he understood that generosity could still leave an unfair system untouched. 1 apartment. 1 family. 1 relieved conscience. What do you want me to do? He asked. Sarah studied him carefully. Are you actually asking? Yes. She pushed the envelope another inch toward him. Stop trying to make me the exception. Daniel looked at the Whitmore Urban Development logo. And instead, Sarah glanced toward the hallway beyond. Her door, toward all the families he had not met. Find out why your system needs exceptions at all. The next morning, Daniel returned to Oak Ridge carrying a legal pad instead of an offer. Laura Bennett walked beside him with a laptop bag over her shoulder. Sarah was outside with Ethan and Grace, waiting for the school bus beneath a pale Pittsburgh sky. Grace noticed Daniel first. The puddle man came back. Ethan looked embarrassed. Grace, his name is Mr. Whitmore. Daniel smiled. I have been called worse. Sarah studied the legal pad. What are you doing here? Finding out why our system needs exceptions. After the children boarded the bus, Sarah led Daniel and Laura into the community room. Word had spread that Whitmore Urban Development was listening, and by 8:15, nearly 30 residents had gathered. Daniel opened his legal pad and wrote the language from the company report, 118 affected units. Mrs. Cooper spoke first. Her proposed apartment satisfied the company's rent and distance standards, but reaching her clinic by public transportation could take more than an hour each way. Daniel crossed out units and wrote households. Michael Reed spoke next. Liam's proposed move could take him away from the school support program that had taken nearly 2 years to establish. Daniel wrote Liam's name. Carlos and Elena Navarro placed 4 referral sheets on the table. Laura examined them carefully. 3 of these were unavailable when you contacted them. Carlos nodded, and the 4th never responded. But your case status says completed, Laura said. Elena gave a tired smile. That is what we have been trying to explain. Daniel looked at Laura. What does completed actually mean? Under the current reporting standard, it can mean qualifying referrals were delivered, even if the family never secured housing. Laura paused. Apparently, yes. More residents spoke. A woman working overnight shifts had repeatedly missed daytime calls. A father sharing one vehicle with his brother could not move farther from work without disrupting the childcare arrangement that allowed both men to keep their jobs. Another resident admitted that she had misunderstood several forms but felt embarrassed asking for help. None of their circumstances were extraordinary. That was what disturbed Daniel most. The system was not failing because unusual lives had encountered it. These were ordinary lives. Jobs changed hours. Children needed schools. People depended on buses. Phones went unanswered during work. Forms were misunderstood. Daniel looked at the heading on his page again. He crossed out households. Beneath it, he began writing names. Margaret Cooper, Michael Reed, Liam Reed, Carlos Navarro, Elena Navarro. One by one, the list grew. His phone vibrated twice. He ignored it. Sarah checked the clock. I need to leave for Brookside. Daniel stood. Thank you for organizing this. Do not thank me yet. She looked at his legal pad. You changed the heading. Units was wrong. Households was better. Still not enough. Sarah glanced at the residents waiting along the wall. No, Daniel looked down at the names. How many cases are marked completed? Laura opened her laptop. I need to verify the current number. And how many of those families have actually secured workable housing? Laura looked at him. That is not something the dashboard currently measures. The sentence changed the room. Daniel stared at the screen. For years, he had trusted dashboards because numbers appeared clean, objective, and difficult to argue with. Now he understood that a measurement could be accurate and still fail to measure what mattered. I want a full sample review, he said. Not just Sarah's case. Not just the people in this room. Laura nodded slowly. That will take time. Daniel looked at the residents, then at the 27 names already covering his pages. Maybe speed is how he stopped seeing them. Sarah picked up her canvas bag. Before leaving, she glanced once at Daniel's legal pad. Yesterday, he had offered her an apartment. Today, he was finally asking whether the company knew where anyone would actually land. She said nothing. She did not need to. Daniel turned to a clean page and wrote one question across the top. What are we rewarding? By Friday afternoon, Sarah sat at a conference table 30 floors above Pittsburgh, looking at a screen that reduced Oak Ridge Apartments to percentages. She had nearly declined Daniel's invitation because leaving Brookside early meant losing paid hours. Laura solved that problem by establishing a compensated resident advisory session, with the same hourly payment available to every participating tenant representative. Sarah agreed. She wore a simple navy blouse and black pants, carrying the same worn canvas bag Daniel had seen on the first rainy morning. Across the table sat Daniel, Laura, Chief Financial Officer Robert Caldwell, and several senior executives. On the screen, one line stood above the others. 118 affected units. Another showed relocation progress. Another showed projected construction delays. Robert clicked to the next slide. Every additional week of uncertainty creates significant exposure. Contractor schedules shift. Financing costs increase. We could be looking at several $100,000 per week if site availability falls behind the current forecast. Daniel glanced at his legal pad. 27 names filled the first pages. How many completed cases have verified housing? He asked. Robert looked toward Laura. That is not our current completion metric. Laura answered calmly. A case may be classified as completed once qualifying referrals have been delivered. Sarah looked at the screen. Can I ask something? Daniel nodded. Sarah pointed toward the numbers. How much did the people on that slide lose while the companies saved those weeks? Silence settled across the room. Robert folded his hands. Ms. Mitchell, I understand the concern, but those losses are difficult to quantify. So are some of yours, Sarah replied. You can calculate financing. You can calculate contractor delays. Mrs. Cooper cannot put a clean number on losing easy access to the doctor she has trusted for years. Michael cannot calculate what changing schools might do to the routine his son spent 2 years building. Robert remained professional. No relocation process can eliminate every inconvenience. I agree. Sarah's answer surprised him. I am not asking for perfect. I am asking why the people with the least control are expected to absorb the uncertainty so the project can keep a clean schedule. Daniel looked toward the presentation. For years, he had treated uncertainty as something strong management removed. Oak Ridge was showing him that uncertainty did not disappear. It moved. When the company protected its schedule, the uncertainty landed somewhere else. On a mother's rent, a child's school, an older woman's transportation, a family's next address. Pause closure of every unresolved relocation case, Daniel said. Robert turned toward him. Daniel, that could affect the construction timeline. Do not stop work already cleared. Do not freeze the entire redevelopment. But no unresolved household gets marked completed until workable housing is independently verified. That changes the standard in the middle of the process. Then change it. Robert leaned forward. We may lose hundreds of thousands of dollars every week. Sarah looked at Daniel, but said nothing. This was no longer a conversation about whether he felt sorry for her. Daniel glanced at the legal pad again. Margaret Cooper, Michael Reed, Liam Reed, Carlos Navarro, Elena Navarro. Names instead of units. Then we should finally measure what our speed actually costs, he said. Laura nodded. I can establish an independent review protocol today. Robert exhaled slowly. You understand what you are committing the company to. Daniel looked at the screen. Not completely. He reached for the presentation remote and switched it off. The percentages disappeared. That is part of the problem. Sarah checked the time and stood. I need to get to Keystone. Daniel looked at the clock. Your shift starts at 6? Yes. You have 40 minutes. Which is why I am leaving. She picked up her bag and reached the glass door. Sarah, Daniel said. She turned. He lifted the legal pad slightly. 27 names. Sarah studied him for a moment. There are more than 27. I know. Then keep looking. After she left, Laura closed her laptop halfway. The sample review may tell us the contractor made mistakes. Daniel looked at the question he had written across the final page 2 days earlier. What are we rewarding? And what if they did exactly what we asked them to do? Laura did not answer. Daniel looked out over Pittsburgh, where buildings and bridges again seemed clean from 30 floors above. For the first time, the possibility frightened him more than finding someone who had failed. Laura Bennett entered Daniel's office at 8:12 Monday morning carrying a folder thick enough to answer the question he had spent the weekend avoiding. Daniel had already been there for an hour. His coffee sat untouched beside the legal pad filled with residents' names. Tell me, he said. Laura remained standing. The system is working. Daniel looked up. What does that mean? It means Harbor Relocation Services is largely meeting the standards in its contract. She opened the folder. Response times are within target. Referral volume meets requirements. Case processing is fast. Documentation is generally compliant. Their performance scores are strong. Daniel stared at her. Then why are families being marked completed without housing? Because the contract rewards completed referrals, not verified moves. Laura placed another document on his desk. It rewards speed, referral volume, closure rates, and schedule compliance. It does not meaningfully measure school continuity, medical access, transportation stability, or whether a family actually signs a lease. Daniel leaned back slowly. Who wrote those standards? Operations drafted them. Legal reviewed them. Finance modeled them. Laura paused. Executive leadership approved them. Daniel already knew what came next. Including me. Yes. He opened the folder. There was no hidden villain, no employee secretly manipulating files, no contractor ignoring a clear promise to protect residents. Harbor had done what Whitmore Urban Development had paid it to do. Daniel turned through old meeting notes until Laura slid one final page toward him. I found this in the board archive. It was a memo from 3 years earlier discussing redevelopment delays. A sentence had been highlighted. Uncertainty must be pushed out of the project timeline. Daniel recognized the language before he reached the signature. His name was beneath it. There is more, Laura said. She opened an archived investor presentation on his computer. Daniel appeared on the screen, younger only by a few years, standing confidently before a room of investors. His recorded voice filled the office. People adjust. Projects cannot wait forever. Laura stopped the video. Daniel said nothing. Outside the windows, Pittsburgh moved through another Monday morning. Cars crossed bridges. Office lights appeared one floor at a time. For years, he had believed uncertainty was evidence of poor management. Remove it. Control it. Keep projects moving. But Oak Ridge had shown him what the reports never had. The uncertainty had never disappeared. It had simply been transferred. From the construction schedule to Mrs. Cooper's medical care. From financing projections to Liam's school routine. From executive calendars to Sarah wondering where her children would sleep months from now. I thought I was removing uncertainty, Daniel said. Laura closed the folder. You were removing it from the project. Daniel looked at the names on his legal pad and putting it into their lives. That afternoon, he went to Oak Ridge alone. Sarah was arriving home between shifts when she saw him near the entrance. You found something. It was not a question. Daniel nodded. The contractor followed the contract. Sarah waited. The metrics rewarded exactly what we are seeing. Fast referrals. Fast closures. Schedule protection. So who gets fired? Daniel looked at her. No one. Sarah's expression softened slightly. That bothers you. I wanted somebody to have failed. Why? Because then I could replace them. Sarah adjusted the strap of her canvas bag, and everything would feel fixed. Daniel nodded. I found an old memo. My memo. I wrote that uncertainty had to be pushed out of the project timeline. Sarah was quiet. I pushed it somewhere, he continued. I just never asked where it went. Sarah looked toward the apartment windows above them. Now you know. Daniel's voice dropped. I built incentives that made people invisible, then build different ones. He looked at her, surprised by the simplicity of the answer. Sarah opened the entrance door. Feeling terrible does not help Mrs. Cooper reach her doctor. It does not keep Liam in his program. Guilt is only useful if it changes what you do next. Daniel glanced down at the legal pad in his hand. For the first time, he understood that accountability was not the moment a powerful man discovered he was wrong. It was everything he chose after he could no longer claim he did not know. 4 months later, Rain returned to Pittsburgh, but Oak Ridge no longer looked the same to Daniel. Construction continued on the cleared sections of the property. Families were still moving. Deadlines still existed. Money still mattered. Nothing had become magically easy. What changed was what Whitmore Urban Development counted as success. A relocation case could no longer be closed simply because a list of apartments had been delivered. Housing had to be verified as available and workable for the family receiving it. Medical access, school continuity, transportation, and documented family circumstances were now part of the review. Residents received independent relocation advocates, and appeal deadlines allowed reasonable extensions when documented circumstances made timely responses difficult. Mrs. Cooper found an apartment less than 2 miles from her clinic and along a direct bus route. Michael Reed secured housing that allowed Liam to remain in the school program he depended on. Carlos and Elena Navarro signed a lease after receiving referrals that had been verified before they were sent. Some residents chose neighborhoods farther away. Others remained close. Not every outcome was perfect, but the company had stopped calling a process complete before the people inside it had somewhere workable to land. Sarah had not accepted Daniel's private apartment offer. Instead, she joined the Resident Advisory Council, receiving the same compensation as every other resident representative. She still worked mornings at Brookside Senior Living and several evening shifts each week at Keystone Office Services. Her car still made an occasional noise, although she had finally saved enough to have it repaired. Ethan got new sneakers. Grace got a warmer winter coat, and the yellow coat from that rainy morning had finally become clean enough for school picture day. Daniel still lived in a world Sarah did not. He still entered buildings where people knew his name before he introduced himself. He still sat in rooms where a sentence could move millions of dollars. But now, beside every project dashboard, he required another report. Not units. Not referrals. People. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Daniel arrived at Oak Ridge for the monthly resident advisory meeting. Sarah stood near the curb beneath a blue umbrella after watching Ethan and Grace climb onto their school bus. Grace pressed her face to the window and waved. Daniel raised a hand. "The Puddle Man," Grace shouted through the glass. Sarah laughed as the bus pulled away. "You are never escaping that name. I have accepted my legacy." They started toward the community office. A sedan approached from behind them, moving toward a wide puddle beside the curb. Daniel noticed it first. Without thinking, he stepped farther onto the sidewalk and gestured for Sarah to move with him. The sedan crossed the water. A harmless spray rose several feet behind them and fell back onto the street. Sarah stopped. Daniel looked over his shoulder. "What?" "Nothing." That expression usually means something. She smiled faintly. "4 months ago, you noticed the puddle after it reached us." Daniel looked at the rain gathering along the curb. "I suppose I learned." "Not about puddles." Sarah adjusted the umbrella between them. Through the community room windows, Daniel could see Laura arranging folders beside several residents. Mrs. Cooper was already there, talking with Carlos Navarro. Michael stood near the coffee table while Liam showed someone a school certificate. Life had not become a clean corporate success story. It was still complicated, expensive, inconvenient, and human. Daniel understood now that responsibility was not making every difficulty disappear. It was refusing to hide difficulty behind numbers that made powerful people comfortable. "I used to think good leadership meant removing uncertainty," he said. Sarah looked toward him. "Maybe it means knowing who carries it." Daniel nodded. They continued. Toward the entrance. Before opening the door, Sarah glanced back at the puddle. "You know what actually changed?" "What?" "You started looking before your decisions reached someone else." Daniel held the door while she entered. For months earlier, he had tried to repair one ruined morning with money. Now he understood something money had never taught him. Power was not measured by how quickly a person could change the world, but by whether he noticed who might be standing in the path when he did.